By now you'll have recognised that there are all sorts of circumstances when you're building or modifying a solution in FileMaker where calculations can come into play. All manner of options and dialogues give you the ability to specify a value or some content that will be the result of a calculation expression. Everything from a variable in a script to the layout that a button will navigate to. You've seen me enter various calculations, mostly fairly simple ones, and I've given brief explanations of what I was doing and why. But it's now time to talk in greater depth about the way calculations are formed and how you can use them to achieve the results you need. First of all, as you've seen, calculations are always entered into the same dialog. Here in the Fields tab of the Manage Database dialog, when I double-click on a calculation field, the Specify Calculation dialog comes up. However, in the Manage Scripts window, within a script, when I specify the condition for an if step, for example, again, the Specify Calculation dialog comes up. It looks pretty much the same wherever you see it throughout the application. So calculations are entered here regardless of where, why, or how you're using them. And it's also the case that calculations use the same basic building blocks and follow the same rules or syntax wherever they're used. So what is the syntax and how can you use it? Well, one of the most important and useful things to know is that calculations are a fairly straightforward kind of language that works according to consistent rules and is loosely based on the language we speak. You can't quite write an instruction in plain English and expect the program to understand and apply your instructions. But nevertheless, the elements of calculations mirror human language. In normal speech or written words, we have sentences that are typically made up of a subject, a verb, and an object. So we string words together fairly effortlessly to make sentences. In FileMaker calculations, you'll find yourself doing something similar. However, rather than writing sentences, you'll write what are termed expressions, sometimes also called formulae. Instead of nouns, you'll be using field names, so that the syntax will apply to whatever value is in a given field at the point when an expression is evaluated and a result returned. Numbers or literal text strings will also take the place of nouns. Those are values that you enter directly into the calculation. And sometimes variables that are created in FileMaker will also serve as the subjects and objects of your calculations. Instead of verbs, you'll be using functions that tell FileMaker what action is being taken. And rather than various other parts of speech such as conjunctions and so on, you'll be using operators. More importantly, the way the language of calculations is pieced together follows a few consistent rules. So once you get familiar with the basics, it becomes much easier to read and understand what has been written and to write other calculations of your own to do a variety of different things. Let's suppose that we wanted to set a field with a value. We might use the setField script command, which allows us to choose a target field into which the value should be set, and then to specify a calculated result. So we have the Specify Calculation dialog, and we get to enter a calculation expression in to determine what will be set into the field. The way the language of calculations is pieced together follows a few consistent rules. So once you get familiar with the basics, it becomes easier to read and understand what has been written and to write other calculations of your own to do a variety of things. One thing that can't really be avoided, however, is that you'll need to acquire some calculation vocabulary. That means getting familiar with some of the more common functions, the operators, and of course the names of tables, fields, and other objects in your solution. It's actually pretty easy. The way the Specify Calculation dialog is set up, everything is on hand, with lists of tables and fields at the top left. There's all the table occurrences, and for the selected table occurrence, all of the available fields. When you simply double-click on a field in the list, the field with its table occurrence name, colons to separate the table occurrence name from the field name, and then the field name is inserted into the calculation at the position of the cursor. The complete reference to a field, including its table occurrence name and field name in this format, is called the fully specified field name. It refers to a specific field in the current record or in the currently available record via the relationship to the table occurrence you've chosen. In the centre of the top section of the Specify Calculation dialog are buttons that insert the most common operators, and there's a list of slightly less frequently used operators at the right, and you can double-click on any of the items in the list to insert them at the current cursor position into the calculation expression that you're forming in the pane in the central area of the Specify Calculation dialog. And of course at the top right are the functions. Listed by default are all functions by name, but you can choose a specific category of functions to view an extract of the available list showing only the functions that perform a particular range of operations. The list of functions is quite large, so it would be reasonably easy to get lost here if you didn't have the ability to shrink the list down to a manageable size, showing only a specific group of functions that you're looking for. It's also important to know that FileMaker's help, using the Help menu, provides you with details and examples of the use of each of the calculation functions, so you have a ready reference available at all times. I'd encourage you to take a little time to browse through the help to get familiar with the range of calculation functions and their uses. But the resources don't stop there. On the FileMaker Inc. website, at this URL, you'll find a document that provides FileMaker Pro 12 functions in a function reference format as a PDF document. And here you'll find all of the categories of functions listed with details about the purpose of each function and how it can be used. In the list of functions at the top right of the Specify Calculation dialog, you'll notice that each of the functions is listed with its complete syntax shown. So for example, the month name function accepts a date as its only parameter. Other functions may require several parameters. For example, amongst the text functions, you'll see that there's a function called middle words. This function requires 3 parameters: the text you want to work on, the word you want to start at, and the number of words you'd like to extract. The function names always appear at the start, with any arguments or parameters being specified within parentheses following the function name. The function names are generally fairly self-explanatory. Middle words, for example, pulls some words out of the middle of a string of words. So for example, if I supply a text literal to provide the text content for the middle words function, which I can do by clicking on the quotes operator button and then typing some text. The text within the quotes is treated as is. The quick brown fox will be passed in as the first parameter for the middle words function. The second parameter, starting word, requires a number. If I put in number 2, the action of extracting some words from the middle of the text string will start at the second word, in this case quick. And the number of words to be extracted can also be entered as a number. So if I put in 2 as the third parameter, we'll be extracting 2 words. So the whole of this calculation expression will return quick brown. That is, it'll return the middle words starting with the second word and running for 2 words. If I add another word into the text literal that provides the text for this function to operate on, say the first quick brown fox, then the expression will return first quick, because first is now the second word, and 2 words starting at the second will give us the string first quick. Of course, if rather than having a text literal as the text for the function, I put in a field reference, such as author's middle name, then the expression will operate on whatever text is found in the author's middle name field on the current record. And so if there are a number of words in the author's middle name field, the second and third words will be returned by the expression as it now appears. With all the available calculation functions, you'll find that the procedure is similar. For example, the pattern count function requires 2 parameters: the text in which to count a pattern and the search string to count. So let's suppose we put a field name in as the text, and then as the search string, enter a text literal with the letter T. This function will count the pattern of 1 or more characters that's supplied as the text in the search string parameter. So in this case, the whole expression will count the number of occurrences of the letter T in the text within the author's middle name field. By exploring the examples in the online help and by looking through the function reference available from the FileMaker Inc. website, you'll quickly become familiar with a range of available calculation expressions and the functions and operators that form part of the language of calculations in FileMaker Pro.